When is this action likely to happen?
Okay, well, let's talk about what could actually happen here, Matt, because it might not happen at all. What we've seen is Iraq's energy minister essentially coming forward and pleading with Saudi Arabia and Russia to come back to the table for an emergency OPEC meeting to stabilize the market. But look, convening a meeting in this environment with all of the travel restrictions and protocols in Austria and elsewhere about how people are engaging at the moment, a meeting looks quite unlikely. At the same time, though, oil prices have stabilized after what was a session in the United States that saw them hitting their lowest level in 4 years. You can see Brent and NYMEX in divergent territory here, but Brent showing some modest upside. At the same time, though, what we've also seen is a fall in crude and distillate stockpiles. That has certainly helped to support the market, but in this environment, the demand outlook is still looking decidedly negative. And of course, we also have OPEC's production cut accord expiring at the end of the month. And that's going to officially start this battle on price and market share between Saudi Arabia and Russia, who will be given permission essentially to pump at will. Goldman Sachs is exceedingly bearish on the outlook. The top commodities forecaster now calling Brent and WTI to average just $20 USD per barrel in the second quarter. Jeff Curry, the head of global commodities research over at GS, saying, look, while it's tempting to view the COVID-19 oil demand shock and the oil price war as separate events, Goldman's saying they're not. At the same time, have a look at some of the key shale plays in the United States as well. And this has been fascinating to watch. Also something to keep watch on as we come into the start of US trade. Look at the downside that we've seen for the likes of Diamondback, Oxy, Marathon Oil, all under pressure stateside. And these stocks are actually among the worst performers this year on the S&P 500. What we've seen is Diamond and Oxy down 70% each this year. Marathon is the fourth worst performer this year with a decline of about the same. Oxy also said yesterday that it's planning on slashing its quarterly dividend to 11 cents. That's down from 79 cents. And it also now plans to cut spending in the order of about 30% as these companies get ready to do battle in the shale patch, with oil likely to fall further from here, at least according to Goldman Sachs. So a very, very pessimistic outlook at the moment, Hadley.
Well, speaking of those kinds of crude realities, guys, I mean, you guys know I'm a student of history. And when you take a step back and think about this within the context of Saudi Arabia, the leadership in that country, the conversation, the famous conversation between Henry Kissinger and His Majesty King Faisal just a few decades ago, essentially King Faisal saying, you know, listen, if this all continues, we can go back to the desert and live on milk and dates. What will you guys do? But what's the reality here? At what point does this start to really bite for the Saudis? Because at this point, they have 500 billion or so in reserves. But at some point, you know, they got to worry about keeping the lights on, no?
Well, exactly. Of course, at home, they're also really constrained here, Hadley. They need money to fund this expansionary Vision 2030 program. And at the same time, you really have to wonder, at what point will they blink? This has become more about politics than about price. They really do want to see a deal here. Remember, it was Saudi Arabia that came into that Vienna meeting with a pledge to cut production. Of course, they also managed to get the rest of the OPEC group on side and came up with this decision to attempt to cut by 1.5 million barrels. But the question is, what will Russia do to support that move? Because it's also the onus of responsibility on Moscow to get this done. And at this point, the Russians have not wanted to play ball. So that's where the sticking point is at this point. And from what we've heard so far, very, very limited progress on either side when it comes to getting a deal done. And it's unlikely that an emergency meeting would be called in enough time to be able to resolve some of the downside that we're seeing, Matt.